Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for our first awards show of the year, the Best Sprinter Awards for the men. Pretty straightforward number one spot, but there's a very difficult discussion to be had to fill out the top three or top five. We've had, I think, a continuance of the changing of a theme with sprinters and how teams sort of prepare their teams or construct their teams for the major grand tours. Will we see a reversal of that next year? We'll go through what criteria we want to see when grading the best sprinter, talk about how we think the lead-outs have changed this year in the last couple of years, and then go through some of the major sprinters before picking our top five or three. Benji's got a list of 12. I don't go down that far, to be honest. But yeah, it's been an interesting year, Benji. And I think, well, it's clear that Alpecin and Philipsen, they dominated, and with Groves as well. And also, do you think Groenewegen, is there a general theme with Groenewegen, Jakobsen underperforming, or Merlier even, or is there individual reasons for all this?
I think there's individual reasons, like, for example, Merlier and Kooij not going towards a Grand Tour, for example, that will impact what level of victories they can achieve in a season. Because, for example, if they both arrive at the Vuelta instead of the parcours that they had throughout the year, then they might have won a stage at a Grand Tour this year, which would also add to the prestige of their victories. But I feel like there's individual stories combined with the factor that I believe versatility is more and more important. And I know you believe that as well, because we've had it about that a few times on this podcast so far. And that hinders riders like Jakobsen, who have a harder time getting over a hill, compared to a Groves, who has a pretty good time getting over a hill.
Yeah, he needs those, and they've sent him to the right races to achieve those. There's also riders who can't get over a hill but are good in other ways, like Merlier, who, he can't climb, but Tour of Flanders, he made the breakaway, and he was able to pull there. Brugge de Panne, Shell de Praise, classic style races he's good at. Welsford's indicated some ability with that as well. So even if sprinters are the big, burly, pure sprinters, some of them are good in other ways. Ewan often, or has been good in Milan San Remo. And there's other guys who are, that's what their bread and butter is, like De Lee, but they really struggle with positioning in the big bunch sprints. So there's a lot of different types of sprinters. We'll sort of go into that now. What are the criteria we're looking for, Benji? Like, where does it... Because I wouldn't call Aaron Broe a sprinter. I would almost call someone like Corbin Strong is really on the borderline too. He's good in other ways. So what are we looking at from a sprinter? I guess, first of all, there's top-end speed as well. That's like... To me, that's not even number one, actually. But that's one factor, is top-end speed. If you put this rider in position, how fast are they is pretty important.
Yeah. I think that's pretty important. And you mentioned already there, put this rider in position, but also the positioning of the rider himself, because it's not always the fault of the lead-out that a rider is not in position. They might be very easy to bully out of position in a sprint. They might just not follow the right riders, not make the right decisions of, we see a lead-out dropping there, and I get blocked. Oops. Stuff like that happens. And some sprinters are not prepared for that. There's one sprinter in specific that I looked at the last few days that around the roundabout sat in the middle of the group behind a randomage des Airs lead out, and in that occasion he got pushed backwards. So that matters for individual riders as well. Competition, I reckon, matters combined with success. Because, like, success is important. I'd rather have a sprinter that wins 5 Grand Tour stages than someone who's a better sprinter in terms of power, in terms of being able to, position themselves, but can't get over a hill and therefore isn't competitive in 99% of the season. That's something that matters, in my opinion, as well. So success matters, but on the opposite end of that, the competition that you fight against, that you sprint against in those sprints, in those victories, for example, also matters to me, right? As in, if you beat Consonni, it's not as valuable to me as if you beat Tim Merlier in a head-on sprint.
That is true. And sort of the Tour de France is the ultimate testing ground, right? Where all the best sprinters are there. All the teams with sprinters want them to win a stage of the Tour. All the best lead-outs are in theory there, and it's the highest level, the highest stakes. And if you win that, it's kind of all these factors coming into one. But there is also Are you able to win from February to October? Philipsen obviously was, but that's also a factor. And do you have the fitness and the capability to go to the Vuelta, do a second Grand Tour like Groves did? And yeah, the start list in the sprints was, as is typical, this is not a secret. This has been the case for a long time. The worst of all the Grand Tours, or even of any World Tour stage race, frankly. But everyone knows that in advance. Everyone can see the parkour in advance. So I don't. Yeah, you have to say, okay, he's not beating the best there, but you have to turn up as well, and there has to be some credit for that as well. So they're the factors: speed, positioning, competition that they beat, overall success, and versatility, which is sort of hills, technical parkour, bad weather, etc., heat, cold, whatever. And lead out as well is a factor in that. And that kind of is in positioning, but how did they perform without a lead out? How did they perform with an average lead out? Which, maybe Sam Bennett gets a knock in that respect, and Olav Kooij, I think, gets some credit in that respect, because sometimes, or Milano is a big example, gets credit in that respect. But, yeah.
He wins as the lead out.
Yeah, he wins. He is his own lead out. Same with the Total guy, Jeffrey Soup. But what have you seen with the lead outs this year? You went and watched all the sprints back. There really isn't, from the tour, there isn't 8 teams lining up with 6 dedicated lead out men. What have you seen this year?
Well, mate, I just saw you upload like an old Hindwevelgem 1992 video, and I thought to myself, Jean-Paul van Poppel, the man with the original sprint train, 5-6 riders in a row, waiting for the final sprinter to come out of their wheel and so forth. Danny's dad, exactly. Going further into the future here, I feel like the HTC High Road days, when Cavendish was in that sprint train, it was also a long train that was just at the front of the peloton. Everybody knew that was going to be the train that was going to be the strongest that day, and everybody kind of respected that somehow. And we saw Quick-Step in, oh God, which year? The year Cavendish still won 4 stage wins.
With like Trentin, Pataki and all them.
Yeah, but also recently, the actual proper lead out we had there by Quick-Step also. But I feel like in recent years, and it's something that has happened over time though, but it's more clear the last 2 years, that we've got 2 other types of lead outs where you've got the pilot type of lead out. Edoardo Affini, for example, brings a sprinter to the front into a position where they are competitive. Then it's up to the sprinter to try and survive there. Yeah. Sometimes Affini goes beyond that and still hangs out about at the front and still helps out. But that's kind of the piloting I see. Also, Laporte with Wout van Aert last year at the Tour de France comes to my head in that sense. And then we also have the other one, which is you've got the Van Poppel lead out, which we mentioned last year, where they're kind of waiting at the back of the peloton and then shoot past at the last minute. But the timing is so important, and also knowing which side you can launch on. Is it on the left? Is it on the right? Where's the wind coming from as well? Stuff like that. Where will it open up after this corner? They got to keep that in mind in the pre-race briefings and so forth. But that's important. But the problem there is a lot of teams fail at that, because if you mistime it, you get waved over by the next team that tries that. And do you reckon that DSM is a prime example of a team that still tries the 5 to 6 man lead out in a lot of races and always gets waved over?
Yeah, they did that a lot. They always present early. They did it from Vuelta a San Juan, where Sam Welsford did win a sprint against Jakobsen. It did work there, but they're doing it with... So take their Tour de France team, for example. They had Dinham, Vermaker, Hamilton, Bardet. That's 4.
Kolb.
No, but I'm talking about half the team are not rouleurs, and are not Dinham's good, but not classic rouleurs, not lead-up men. So you're basically trying to set up from 5 to 7 Ks with those guys, plus Degenkolb, Edmondson, Eckhoff. So 3 dedicated lead-up men for Welsford. It's not possible. It's not possible to do properly. And when you look at then Alpesen's team, they didn't even do that. And their whole damn team is rouleurs. It is the traditional team. You got the Dillier, Gurgle type guys, Søren Kragh, who can do that. And then you've got specialist lead-up men, Ricard Sinkeldam, who aren't even the last man.
Exactly. Van der Poel's there as well, which is a pretty big rider to have. It's always useful to have a Van Aert or a Van der Poel rider as your lead out in races. That will certainly help. We saw it in the Tour of Denmark with Van Aert doing it for Van Aert doing it in Britain for Kooij, and then in Denmark I recall Laporte being the one doing it for Kooij. So those are like specialized riders that are next level in that sense. So that's a special character to have in the team. But I agree there, and you mentioned it when it comes to Welsford. Like I rewatched the first 2 sprints he had at the Tour de France. The man was struggling in 19th position, completely alone, trying to keep himself in position. Nobody to bring him to the front. So it's like they were burned out before the last kilometer even started in those. And anyway, we spoke about lead outs.
Well, I just want to tie a bow on that.
Okay.
I still think there is space for the traditional 2010 HTC lead out. You just have to have the right riders. In fact, I think it could even be more effective now, where you just hold position with the GC guys to 3Ks, and then you're fighting a lot of teams who don't even have specialist lead outs, who haven't brought the right lead outs like Alpecin did. But you got to have the right riders to do it. And obviously, most teams, the transition is no one wants to bring 7 dedicated guys for a sprint train. Yep. And so realistically, it's not going to happen. So how do you manage it in a world where half your team are punchers or GC riders? And so it is the late move up Bora style, which also is sort of the middle ground option that we see a lot of teams trying. Well, They do it quite well. Bennett wasn't able to finish it off. But yeah, that's my view on the lead outs. I think there's space for everything. And then the Poisson Pilote, one-man army guy, Affini style.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I also want to say, like, there's also the danger if you're at the front with 7 riders that we also see that the sprint train kind of splits in half and you lose half your sprint train.
Yeah.
So these are all things that are dangerous parts of each of those sprint trains. But I agree, lead outs are changing. And I'd argue that because of the Poisson Pilote, because of the new strategy like from Poppel, I feel like the lead out matters so much and sometimes is not seen as valuable as they actually are.
Yeah, I think because like you've got a list here, Benji, of sprinters. Bauhaus, Dali, Mayus, Milan, Welsford, Pedersen, Ewan, Cavendish, Groenewegen, Jakobsen, Groves, Kooij, Merlier, Philipsen, Bennett. You didn't have Bennett anywhere. Milano, Demar, Ackermann, Decline, Thijssen, Gaviria. Probably that's not even including guys like a Corbin Strong.
Yeah.
I couldn't name 10 professional lead outs.
Yep.
Just the first man. I couldn't name 10 first men, let alone the second guy.
First men we completely trust, as in we would hire to do a lead out. I agree.
Yeah,
I could name 10 random lead outs, but they might not be good at their job.
Yeah, I couldn't name them. And I guess that's it. I mean, maybe am I not Alexis Renard? It's also hard to sometimes disentangle the lead out from the sprinter's ability himself. How good is Renard, or how good is Christoph? I don't think very good, frankly, in the bunch sprints anymore. But I think his lead out and UNOX lead out in the Tour often impressed me. And I think it was often a Christoph problem. But sometimes he was also dropped off with 500 meters to go in Crow Race, for example.
And like you look at Van Poppel and Morku in 2023, for example, and you think, oh, have they declined to give a bit because their sprinter is not as successful as they were in previous years? Or is it because the relationship, the chemistry between those sprinter and the lead out are not necessarily as good anymore? Because we saw Jakobsen visibly not choosing Merku in some of the sprints, and if he would have been in a better position, for example. But we also have seen moments where Merku wasn't on the level that he was before. So it's like, it's probably a combination of the two. But I do feel like leadouts are often seen as worse just because their sprinter is not competing at a level. Like we mentioned a few times on this podcast, a rider like Daniel McClay always feels like a good leadout to me if I see him. He did it for Buhani back in the days. Like, I'd like to see him do that for a World Tour team.
Yeah, and I don't know if I think he's going to do that for Demar next year, maybe. But so the problem is sometimes guys, if they're that good, they don't want to be a leader. And that's where you have, the best lead-outs in the world are Van der Poel, Christophe Laporte, and Wout van Aert, but they're not full-time lead-out riders because they're too good to do that. But let's get into the sprinters and their seasons. It's hard to go past Jasper Philipsen. Do you know why he didn't go to the desert, Benji? Because he starts his season in Kuurne.
I don't know what the specific reason was, but I recall the storyline back in the day being that Alpecin oh, they're starting their season late. Oh, they don't look that great in their first few races. Ooh, is something wrong at Alpecin and so forth? And I feel like that narrative quickly changed when March hit. Because when March hit, Tirreno arrived, Milano Sanremo arrived, and they were winning left and right. So it's a late season start for Jasper Philipsen, but in total, the man had 8 World Tour victories and 19 total victories. So 11 non-World Tour victories. I'm not counting the national non-UCI races, for example, like the Leedal Koerse or something like that. I'm counting the actual like races that matter in that sense. But if we look closer at that, the 8 World Tour wins are also wins at high level. Like, we're talking about Tour de France sprints when it comes to Philipsen.
Yeah.
4 stage at the Tour de France, including the green jersey. The green jersey aside for a second. If we take a look at the individual sprints that he rode, stage 3, stage 4, stage 7, stage 11 are the ones that he won at the Tour de France. His lead out does quite a bit of work in some of them, as in Van der Poel was great at his job. Stage 3 was the one where you had the bend where he basically borderline deviated into Wout van Aert towards the barriers. He ended up winning that sprint when Wout van Aert also stopped on the right side of him. When it comes to sprinting, stage 4 was the one where Mathieu van der Poel pushed Girmay aside to make sure he could lead out Philipsen. And stage 7 is really the one where stage 7 and 11 are the ones where you can really look at Philipsen himself. As in stage 7, Van der Poel launches lead out, forcing, and he burns out too early. He's burning out too early to the point that Philipsen has to jump to another sprinter, which is that one where Cavendish is actually the one sprinting on the right. Philipsen jumps to the wheel of Philipsen, and you got this scenario where you basically have Cavendish with his shifting problem, remember?
Yeah, his gears skipped to the back. It jumped up a cog, sprint over. He wasn't very happy.
So here you see that adaptability that I'm talking about. It matters, like the positioning adaptability. And in stage 11, it's even more where he basically has to do everything alone in a sprint with not an Alpecin train to lead him out. So that's where his own positioning really comes out. So it's not just that he has the best lead out. He's also, in my opinion, very good at positioning and very good at adapting mid-sprint.
That's why he wins so much, 19 wins, is because the parkour has to be very, very hard beforehand for him to be dropped. Like, this guy is not someone you need to worry about the time cut. He's not even in the gruppetto. He's often in the group that actually is kind of ahead of the gruppetto, riding with like puncher style riders. He climbs really, really well. He makes all those. He makes bad weather. He makes crosswinds. He makes uphill drags, which was the motorway circuit one. Benji kind of was a little bit uphill where Ewan came second, I think, and Coquard was decent, where Van der Poel got relegated against Biniam. I will say, and this is, I think, evidenced by his losses in, the break one on stages 18 and 19, but on the Champs-Élysées, I don't think he's necessarily in a 150-meter side-by-side sprint out and out like the quickest dominant sprinter. And that would be impossible, I think, because physically there's no way he can put out the absolute 5 to 10 second power numbers fresh that Jakobsen, Groenewegen, and Merlier can. I don't believe he can. But he's super aero. And those situations where those other top guys get delivered fresh into the equal position as Philipsen are few and far between. And sprinting and winning across the season is about playing the numbers, being in that right position. He does it better than anybody. Sometimes I think unfairly, and I think the UCI could have looked at a few of his sprints this year, but they didn't. Yeah. And it's not up to him to relegate himself. He plays to how the rules are enforced, and
the game's the game.
Yeah. So I mean, he's the best sprinter of the year by far. 4 TDF wins alone is that. I do think he had the best lead out in the tour. I do think he is beatable. Yeah. And I do love how he's also great in classics like Roubaix, unbelievable second, Brugge de Panne. But yeah, when was the last sprinter like this? He was the best sprinter in the world, Benji.
What do you mean? As in,
who wasn't like a Kittel Cav sprinter, who was actually less like. Also, he's both the best classic sprinter, like Pete Degenkolb back in the day, and also the best bunch sprinter in the world.
I don't know, actually. I'd have to go back and take a look at every year because, like, I don't know about that. I couldn't tell you, but I do want to say, like, you see stage 21 at the Tour de France, Champs-Élysées. I don't think that's a very indicative stage to whether Philipsen or something is better, because Philipsen was riding on the bad side of the Champs-Élysées, because you've got the one side that's more smooth to ride on, you've got the other side that's more wobbly to ride on when it comes to the cobbles, and Jordi Meus kind of benefited from being on the good side there. So positioning matters there, and I think, like you said, it versatility matters, stuff like that matters, and the most important factor that you mentioned there for me is the value that a team can give is not just the lead out that you see in the last sprint. When analyzing a sprint, it's too often just seen as the sprint itself. It's the part that comes before it, the fact that he's not in the wind while moving up. All that stuff can lead to that tiny bit of percentage more in the actual sprint that actually makes a difference over their top end differences. And that's why, for example, in the Bauhaus of Belgium Tour, I reckon that he had a sprint against Jakobsen there where Jakobsen 1v1 beat him. Like, there are moments like that because these riders are relatively similar when it comes to their top speed, when they're head-to-head after stages where they both have been able to save until the sprint. Then it's going to be difficult to have that difference between the two. But Philipsen makes a difference for me when it comes to positioning, when it comes to versatility, when it comes to his team delivering him with less fatigue at the sprint. And that's about the three things I can think of.
Yeah, I think picking up Sinkeldam from the wreckage of B&B, you know, and he's not the last man. He's not the second last man. They put a guy, he's not good enough to be a top last man anymore, I don't believe. But you put him third last man to help it in the melee. Perfect for it. And Ricard was the best last man. And, you know, he had health issues, comes back second. So the construction around it is perfect. And, you know, we haven't even got on to Groves. But yeah, that was Philipsen's season. An interesting one is Tim Merlier, who I think he's similar to Philipsen in terms of good in the classics. Opened the year super hot. Also one of those guys like Jakobsen, when you put him in space and it clicks, he looks like no one can beat him, and he's the fastest in the world. First stage of Oman, but then I don't know whether there was another stage that. Oh yeah, he can't. There was one stage that was in between. Oh, I can't remember, but I swear there was one stage where I was like, oh, maybe you could have done a little bit better there. Oh, so for example, the Muscat Classic, like he just can't get over a hill. Like Jente Berman's won that, he can't get over one. Paris won the first stage. UAE won 2 stages against good competition. Can Wevel him okay. And then I swear I didn't see this guy after Tour of Flanders, Benji. I don't remember seeing him. Okay, he won Polonia races and second in Renui Tour, but his schedule to me leaves a lot to be desired, and I think he was supposed to be preparing for the Vuelta.
Yep.
And that's and then Remco went in. I still think they should have sent him. I know I said that before. I said there's no reason why they couldn't have sent him, but I think his season could look a lot better. Yeah, exactly.
He could have played the role of Casper Pedersen. Obviously, Casper Pedersen can get over a hill better and so forth and stuff like that, but Merlier could have played the role. He was valuable in the team time trial at UAE Tour, for example, to the team. So he's willing to work for others as well. And in the UAE Tour stage, he won yes, it was a millimeter sprint versus you in the first one. And yes, the last one is really impressive because they're basically it's that sprint in UAE where it's kind of the what do you call it? The bendy one. the one where, the chicane one, where you got to kind of go diagonally through a certain corner with your lead out to make sure nobody can come on each side of you. And Bora had a lead out there. He starts in P11 at 350 meters to go, and this guy just slides on barrier side alone, positioning himself, adapting there, going under the Bora lead out, and opens a sprint at 250 meters, relatively early. Ideally, as a sprinter, you don't want to go at 250 meters to go, and he straight up cleans people. So he can also do stuff alone, but in other days, I'm also there were a lot of sprints where he started from a position that was uncompetitive. You said that he won a stage of Pyrenees. He also lost a stage of Pyrenees, stage 5, where he was sprinting from P10. When the sprint started, finishes P3, if I recall correctly. Renui Tour, stage 1, he lost that, sprinting from P10 to P2. There's all these sprints in there where you notice him in the background and he sprints towards the front, but if he was in a better position, he'd be competitive for the actual sprint. And I haven't looked at it close enough to figure out whether it's
I think their lead out was dog shit.
Okay.
Familiar.
Because he has 5 World Tour wins and 11 total wins. You mentioned a few of them, and I'm are these victories, 2 in UAE Tour, 1 in Paris-Nice, 1 in Rui Tour, 4 World Tour in those, like, he's got a race schedule that's less prestigious than the old Phil Bauhaus schedule. Let's be honest about that. Phil Bauhaus had a better schedule this year than Tim Merlier, which is shocking to say. I think recency bias will lead many people to underrate Tim Merlier's sprinting this year.
I think so. I think a lot of people will put Kooij above him. I don't have Kooij above him. I'll do it in all. I have Merlier second best this year. Second best sprinter this year because I don't think the lead out was that good. I think in space, delivered fresh, he's maybe the quickest guy on his day. He is inconsistent. Does he get penalized? Like, was he going to go to the World Tour? I think so. Is that his fault? Didn't get picked for the Tour de France. Jakobsen went. I think Merlier should have gone. Luke's going to kill me for saying that. I think he was really, really good, and his wins are of the highest quality and really impressive. Yep. So, yeah, and he is quicker than guys like Kooij and Groves, but as you said, like those guys have other attributes and characteristics. So, I'd be interested to see what happens with him next year because I can't see their lead out having been improved too much. But maybe I mentioned Kooij. Let's get into the two versatile guys. Yeah. Kooij's got the second most wins of any of the sprinters, I think, 13 total, 4 World Tour wins, 3 of them were at Bologna and Guangxi, 1 was at Paris-Nice, though I think he is Philipsen 2 years ago. He is Philipsen who got beaten by Cavendish in the Tour de France 2021 over and over and over and over, who didn't quite have that top end, was always in position, because Philipsen came second 4 times, I think.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you're in position all the time, you actually still win a lot. If you're always there to be competitive. And I think his fitness is very, very good. But yeah, it's clear to me, Benji, when you look at that sprint against Milano in Guangxi this week, there was one of those sprints where I think Milano just rides away from him. And that wouldn't have happened to Philipsen. So Kooij is ticking like 4 of the 5 boxes. I think he's just missing that top end speed right now.
I agree with you on that one. I feel like when I look at him, there's been like bumps in the road this season and also progression compared to last year and the previous years. Because I remember back in the day, Olav Kooij, I think Seg Racing or something was the team that he was initially on, arriving at Lissaman, I hope, if my memory serves me right. And he like built that up and he gradually got better when it comes to his speed and so forth. But last year at the start of the year, I felt like he was having the speed. I feel like he was competing with top sprinters at the UAE Tour last year already.
Yeah.
And I felt like his positioning was a major issue there. As in, his lead out was not perfection last year. Let's be honest about that. During that race.
Dumoulin, yeah, it was second last man.
Well, I think Rosen was also part of that terrain. Yeah. But next to the lead out, he also didn't really fight for the wheels right. Like, for example, if he was in like the top 7 riders or something, he might get squished back to top 8. He might get squished back to top 9 by the time the sprint starts. Then you're not in a position to make that sprint happen. And I feel like he fights for his positions better this time around. I feel like we saw that progression already during last year, but even more this year when it was actually on point in the majority of the race. So positioning he's now really good at, actually. And I think there might have been a moment this year, UAE Tour, Paris-Nice, the both of those, where in the UAE Tour and in some stage of Paris-Nice, he obviously won a stage there, but in the first 2 stages, I think there was the feeling in my head where could he be spending more energy moving into position instead of his previous saving energy in a bad position? Because last year he saved energy in a bad position and therefore maybe had the speed but didn't have the position to be competitive. While at the start of this year, I felt like he might have spent more energy moving into position, but might not have the top speed left to be able to beat the people while he's in that position. That makes sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Because there was a lot of UAE stages where he flashed late, and you're like, ooh, if he'd just been in space, he would have won that. If he just was, he would have won that. But you're right, maybe other guys already spent their energy, Merlier and Bennett, beforehand. I think I wouldn't say he had the best lead out all year. In Tour of Britain, he certainly did. I mean, a lot of his wins are Tour of Britain, Guangxi,
stat padded.
Pole, they are stat padding like the year before. The Paris is the big crown where he beats good guys there after coming second a couple of times as well. Because he came fourth in the first stage, second in the second stage, and then won the fifth stage. So he's just always there or thereabouts. I think he's he's a classic sprinter too. Second in Brugge de Panne, eighth in Gent-Wevelgem. I really want to see him at opening weekend next year in Kuurne and Omloop. I think he can be I think he's just a good all-round racer. He reminds me of De Maar a little bit, actually. Piek De Maar.
Yeah.
As well, he was good in the Netherlands road race. He, on a punchy circuit, him and Van Baarle worked over Van der Poel. So I can't wait to see how he goes. He's still on the stages like in the Bingo Bongo Tour. He's still not quite good enough in the proper classic stage.
Yeah.
The Gerardsbergen stage, he got lost all his time there. I think the next step up to get to the sort of Pedersen Classics level, you need to be staying around with those guys on those stages. But he's a sprinter. He had a fantastic year, and I think he's going to be going to a Grand Tour next year. Has to, Benji. Like, can we penalize Kooij for not doing a Grand Tour when it wasn't like it clearly wasn't his choice?
It's not his fault. Like, it's the same with Merlier. He also got fucked over when it comes to the team race program and so forth, hindering his program personally. So those two riders are affected by that. But if they are both at the Vuelta, Groves is not winning 3 stages, in my opinion.
No.
That's just how I see it. So,
well, this is the big one here. The best sprinter, Groves has 4 Grand Tour stage wins.
yes.
6 World Tour, 5. The 6 World Tour, because 2 at Catalonia.
Yes.
I don't think Groves was a better sprinter than Kooij this year.
No.
I really don't think he was.
Let's look at the categories for a second. We said at the start. Speed, Kooij is faster, in my opinion. Positioning and adaptability,
Kooij.
I'd still put Kooij higher. Competition, Kooij sprinted against better competition when winning the races. Success, Groves won more races, deserves to win that. One more prestigious races, sorry. More prestigious races. So Groves takes that one. No.
Yeah,
Wait.
Groves takes that one.
Yeah, Groves take that one. And then versatility, Groves is higher in my opinion. Groves
can climb, unbelievable climber, yeah.
So it's not super distant between the two, but is it me or...
I think there's a big gap in the big boy bunch sprints, again, with the top guys all there.
Yeah, I think so as well. But in my head, I'm also thinking we're hammering the point that versatility is so important. But how important is it? And are we looking at it in the glasses of a pure sprinter classification? No, because versatility matters, right?
Yeah, like Pedersen, I also consider in this category. Well, Van Aert I also consider in this category. They just weren't good enough this year. But Pedersen's a sprinter. He's a versatile one too. You know, if did he do the Vuelta? No. If they'd sent him to the Vuelta like they did the year before, I mean, they leaned on him heavily. It really, really matters. But yeah, that's why I have... Like, if you said to me which sprinter was the best, even just off the top of my head, I would pick Kooij over Groves. But then let's go into we spoke about versatility. Let's go to the traditional ones. We'll try to do these a little bit quicker. Jakobsen, Groenewegen, Cavendish, Ewan. These are sort of the sprinters deluxe of the 20, well, Cavendish longer, but, 17, 18, 19, 20, they were killing it, 21. Jakobsen had a bad year. Sorry, Luke. Yeah. Close your ears. 1 World Tour win at Tirreno, 7 total wins, crashed in the Tour, didn't trust his lead out, sometimes his fault, sometimes the lead out's fault, can't get over a speed bump. I think the positioning has just been such a problem for him this year, and for DSM next year, I really worry how that's going to work. But sometimes Benji, like in that Hungary sprint, which, okay, it's Hungary, but it was against Groenewegen.
Yeah.
He's another one where on his day, you think this is the best sprinter in the world because he can put 5 bike lengths into someone who's also good, like nothing in the saddle. And you're like, he has incredible power. So what went wrong for him this year?
I think he still has the speed. I think we said it with Merlier as well. I feel like the quick step lead outs were not effective this year. No. And I would say that it's not just the lead-out's fault when it comes to Jakobsen. There were moments where he just wasn't following his lead-out, or where he was just surfing wheels in the wrong way and didn't get it into a competitive position that way. So I reckon it's a combination of both the team and his fault that he wasn't positioned in races. But I think position was the big issue. I will say there were moments where I was like, oh, kind of expected more from Jakobsen. If he's in this position, he should be doing better. I think in San Juan there were moments like that, but then again, San Juan's really early on the season, so how valuable can that be seen throughout the rest of the year? There were sprints like, you said it, the one you mentioned, Hungary, but also Bauhaus of Belgium, to where he really was on point. Then the World Tour victory that he did have, it's interesting because the scenario is like this. We've got Gaviria, Jakobsen, Philipsen in the sprint. Gaviria launches early. Philipsen reacts to that early and gives Jakobsen kind of somewhat of a lead out. And Jakobsen wins out of the wheel of Philipsen. But on one hand, you can say, yes, he benefited from the scenario in the sprint, but most sprinters would also not be able to come out of Philipsen's wheel anymore at that point. So you still got to give him the credit for it.
Philipsen's a hard guy to draft. He's so aero, like Kooij, aero as well. He's like old Cavendish, or current Cavendish still, you know, they're not giving you much behind. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I do think that Philipsen crash, you know, I do think Jakobsen could have won a Tour stage. I really do. Because would he have consistently come top 3 in stages? No. But there were so many goddamn sprints. Maybe one of those breakaway transition stages on 18-19, quick step, pace it back if they still have Jakobsen in the race. I think he would have really gone close to winning one if he'd stayed in the race. Maybe not after the big mountains, but yeah, a tough year for him, and certainly not in my top 3.
The reason I don't think he would have is because I believe he would have had too much trouble in the Tour de France lead up towards the sprints based on what we've seen outside of the Tour de France. But then again, Jordi Meeus won on the Champs-Élysées. So, like,
but he might have, but he faked a mechanical on the Champs-Élysées the year before.
Oh, okay. But no offense to Jordi Meeus, but that is an outlier for Jordi Meeus. Jordi Meeus is not a top sprinter as a consequence of once winning on the Champs-Élysées. Like, we got to keep it objective here. I'm Belgian. I love Jordi Meeus, but I'm not going to put him at the top 3 of my sprinting list as a consequence of that one sprint. Then if Jordi Meeus can do that, Jakobsen can also do that in that race if he's positioned well. So it's all about the positioning for me. And Dylan Groenewegen is a similar and different story, as in 1 World Tour win, 6 total wins. It's very similar to what Jakobsen had, 1 World Tour win, 7 total wins. And that World Tour win was in UAE, to if I recall. UAE. He served on Sam Bennett's wheel and then ended up winning from the wheel of Sam Bennett after lead out of Van Poppel for Sam Bennett. But looking at his Tour de France, I think is the most important for me, which stage 3 and 4, I looked at those sprints and the man was burned out before the sprint started. And then we get to stage 7 where he's well positioned but lacked the energy to get to properly sprinting. And these are 3 sprint stages where Alpecin really threw it all in the fire by having a proper lead out, by making it hard for everybody in that lead out and so forth. It was also a hectic final, so a lot of fighting for positioning. And then we have stage 11, for example, where there's weaker leadouts. We don't have Van der Poel doing the leadout, for example, for Philipsen in that stage. He ends up second. My theory is that hectic finals and hard leadouts by Alpecin with Van der Poel and so forth burn Groenewegen before the sprint starts.
I agree. Because, you think, he's going to kick now. We're going to see this big dump of 1,800 watts. And it doesn't happen some of the time. And in the desert, we did see that. In Saudi Tour, we did see that. In UAE Tour, we saw that on a couple of the stages. To be honest, he was much more consistent than I thought he was, Groenewegen. Like, he really was a lot more consistent than even someone like Merlier, actually. He scored quite a few points for a sprinter that didn't win, that only won one World Tour race. 30 years old. I think the biggest problem, and this is going to be exacerbated by them adding Caleb Ewan, which I don't think we've mentioned, Jaco, next year, is the lead out I don't think was good enough. They didn't send Campbell Stewart to the Tour with him. He went to the Giro, where he actually positioned Matthews quite well, and he's looked good at the end of this year, Campbell Stewart. And this is what we spoke about at the top of the show. Teams are always thinking about the sprinter. And it's like, well, you're paying Groenewegen, got to be good money, solid 7 figures. Ewan not sure because of the lotto thing. you're not going to unlock that success without the correct lead out. And like Mezgec look good. He can look good in Saudi and look good in Slovenia and look good in Hungary, but Mezgec is not Affini, is not Tiller, is not Laporte, is not Van Poppel, in my opinion. Good, nice rider, sometimes did do a good job. I think Mezgec second last in the Mullen role, very good in the Ricard position, but they're missing a top leader, and I think missing also, missing a few pieces and also timing and a lot of things. I think they had a lot of problems putting Groenewegen in good, but maybe it's his fault too.
Exactly, and I feel like I criticized Jayco at the start of the year, if I recall, by sending their sprint train to Saudi, if I recall, instead of to a race with proper competition.
Yeah, but they have a Saudi sponsor.
Yeah, I know, but which it's logical sponsor-wise, but sportive-wise, I think they could do better. And I got criticized massively for saying that. But I feel like it really delivers on the point now where the weaker the lead out of the opponents are, the better it is for Jayco when it comes to their own lead out. Because in all the races where their lead out is on level or better than other lead outs, that's where they can deliver their sprinter in a good position. When there's other teams with competitive lead outs, they're fucked.
Yeah, I think so. They get washed over really easily, and they get washed all the way back. And then they're literally scrapping to just put Groenewegen in, even a position where he can do any sprint at all. I still think Groenewegen is really quite good.
Yes.
And I'll be interested to see how it goes. I think he'll have a better year than Fabio next year.
It's interesting because, like, first of all, Caleb Ewan, you mentioned it, him coming to the team.
Let's just go to him.
Yeah, let's mention them both at the same time and then afterwards make a conclusion about them. Because Caleb Ewan had a pretty shit season, but he was robbed, right? He was robbed not only once, but twice.
The GP Monster, which I forgot about, where his former teammate Pedersen beat him, who went into Marseille. Also, I don't know about the Pedersen one. The Merlier one to UAE, I don't know what happened there. I swear there was no difference. That was a fiction. They should have been... I think both of them should have been a dead heat by the letter of the law, frankly. Like, it was too close to be certain.
If you don't remember, Monster is the one where they had that finish photo that was so blurry that you couldn't make out anything when it comes to the
they were dead heats.
Exactly. Like, normally when it comes to a sprint where you can't make out the winner, there's a rule in the rule book that you can do a dead heat. I think it's only in championships, though. I'm not sure. Which then leads to, like, the riders having to do a 1v1 over 1 kilometer, which I really want to see that at some point. That sounds amazing. But to go back to Ewan, like, 0 Walter wins, 1 total win, a random Belgian classic that I don't care about. So, oops. But that being said, he was still competitive when he was in position in certain sprints. Let's start off with your amazing race, Sandstorm and Under. He was completely out of position in that, I think it was stage 1, when he was riding for the Aussie national team. Was like sprinting from P15, finished seconds. So from 15th to 2nd in 200 meters, like, not the best competition. Let's put that aside for a second. Versatility. Tour Down Under, stage 3. I think it was Victor Harbour, Campbelltown. Like a hill towards the end in the last 15 kilometers. He finished like P6 or something.
He won the bunch sprint behind.
Of like a small group behind against like the versatile sprinters like Corbin, Strong, and so forth. So he still has this versatility that we also see at Milano Sanremo sometimes when it comes to Ewan. So I think he's going to win multiple sprints at the Santos Tour Down Under next year. Combined with what I said about Jayco, they will have a competent sprint train at that race. Other teams might not. Maybe Alpecin brings Groves with a lead out, which might be problematic. But that being said, I reckon he's going to be back to winning ways more than this year. But whether he can do it on the top step, I don't necessarily see it yet.
Well, that's the weird thing, because the first 2 sprints in the Tour, he on the podium at both, 3rd and 2nd. And then just the complete meltdown happened with Lotto Destiny. Now, Stefan Ulo said he kind of regrets what he said during the Tour. Mm-hmm. That's not how he'd approach it in the future. To be honest, I got no problem with what he said. I am intrigued that, like we've seen a couple of times, Bennett went back to Bora after a bad breakup. Was that a success? No. Barguila's going back to DSM after a bad breakup. we'll see how that goes. Now, Ewan is going back to Jayco after they left him out of the tour team in when he was the best sprinter in the world, maybe. And he went to Lotto, won a lot of races, and he's going back there with Groenewegen still there, and I don't know who's going to be the lead out. So obviously his teammates weren't also too impressed with how he was racing, and also, frankly, when they were in the relegation battle, seeing a guy give up on fighting for honourable positions in sprints last year really wouldn't have endeared him to management or his teammates either. So don't know how the financials worked out. I'm just going to spitball. I reckon Lotto Destiny eating a bit of cash. 200, 300, maybe. I could be so far off. So he leaves. Maybe he's eating a bit of cash, 200, 300. And then, because they said he's still earning more than DeLee, right? After DeLee's extension at Lotto. And then maybe Jayco are paying 70%, 65% of what he was earning, supposed to earn in 24 at Lotto. I don't know.
He was on 2 mil at Lotto.
2 mil. So yeah, my guess is like he's eating 3, Lotto eat 3, and Jayco paying 1, 2, 1, 3. Could be completely wrong. Don't know. But
that's what speculation is for, huh? But the combination of both, you mentioned it at the start of this discussion about them, it's going to be hard for them to manage their lead outs for those 2 riders if they already had trouble managing it for 1 rider. But like, I don't necessarily believe Groenewegen might just step up from here, but it's hard to see Caleb Ewan not step up from 2023.
Yeah, I think he has to be better. You know, he's only 29 years old. Would I have given him the money with the next 2 years being important for relegation from Jayco? I don't know. If they can get Ewan in the right headspace with the right lead out to the right races, he might be with the increased points in Grand Tour stages.
What?
And they got to send him into the Giro.
If we sent Matthews and Ewan to Milano San Remo, and they're both in the second group, Matthews will start riding for Ewan, and he's suddenly got a competition.
Matthews ride for Ewan.
But Ewan ain't going to ride for Matthews, that's for certain.
Remember when we were like, what will happen with DeLee and Ewan in Milano San Remo? And then DeLee got dropped on Cipressa. I mean, you know who should be Ewan's lead out in the Giro? Matthews.
I don't want to know. Oh.
It should be Stewart and Matthews last man. If they
I actually agree.
They should. Putting egos aside and everything, there's other stages for Matthews, but the others are pure sprints that Ewan is the better option for. Anyway, hopefully he improves next year or gets back to his winning ways. I'll try speed run through the others. Bauhaus, only 1... Is that right, Benji? He only had 1 win this year?
Yes. His schedule was completely flipped to do the Tour de France, and he only has 1 win, but it's a World Tour win, so...
Oh, I mean, TDU.
You're not roasting the Tour Down Under. But he was very consistent at the Tour de France. I think he had the most podiums outside of a sprinter outside of... 3 points at the Tour de France
3 podiums, yeah. And scored more points than in any of his other career years. So, yeah, he was consistent. He just went on... He got a bit maybe not exposed, but we knew this was his level, that it's a big difference between Crow race sprints and the Tour de France, quite obviously. Welsford, 4 total wins. Breakout in San Juan, where he beat Jakobsen and Bennett. I think he was there with Van Poppel. Got that got the Bora contract, sorry. But DSM replaced him with Jakobsen. He replaces Bennett. Some musical chairs there. Struggles with... he's a traditional sprinter, pure sprinter. Good in flat classics, but versatility... There's a knock, positioning, I think a bit of a knock as well, but top-end speed, very, very, very fast.
I also think that not just his fault is a positioning, the team was also not just very good at helping him. I mentioned at the start of this podcast, like at the Tour de France, the fact that he has 2 sprint stages where he's fighting in 17th position alone without any help. In the other stages, he's being sent into Narnia because the team goes around the wrong set of roundabouts because of preparation there. Like, Bora will definitely do better with Welsford, to the point that I'll say that he's probably going to be a breakout sprinter next year and move into the top sprinters next year. But the versatility will be a problem and will probably remain that unless he can really... I don't know. Do you feel like he showed himself at Scheldeprijs at some point in that echelon?
I think he's good in flat classics and in echelons, and in Saudi, he was good in echelon too. So,
what do you think about Welsford in Roubaix in 5 years?
I think why not? Why not send him to Roubaix? Bora's classic squad is terrible anyway, so it's not like they have 8 good riders to send with Politkon to Paris-Roubaix. He should do the Giro with the lead out because Roglic is going to the Tour de France.
Van Poppel, right?
Yeah. Van Poppel and Mullen should go to the Giro with they should fully construct an Alpecin-style lead out and try and win as many stages as possible with Welsford.
Do you reckon they might overrate Jordi Meus as a consequence of his Champs-Élysées compared to Welsford, who I believe is a better sprinter?
Maybe you send him as I don't know. No, I don't think so. They can see the numbers. They can see the data. There's no way. Pedersen, more of a classics rider, but still 3 sprint wins. Super versatile. Good in one-day classics, but just not that top bunch sprinter. Although, Paris-Nice, he's got in cold, wet conditions in a tricky stage. He's still very good. I think he lacks the top end of, he just lacks a bit of top end. We saw when he got beaten by Merlier and Bennett. And did Kooij beat him out of the wheel in the 5th stage? Yeah, he did.
I think he did.
He did, yeah. I
also feel when it comes to Pedersen that compared to last year, I feel like he's less consistent in the flat sprints. He's not as close in the flat sprints. He was in the wheel of Van Aert, for example, last year in the sprints and so forth. This year, his 3 wins are World Tour wins, and one of them is like very versatile or very adaptive, where was it the Bemerside Classics, where he was one of the sprinters, but then he does like the classics move of bridging towards the breakaway in the last kilometer and then out sprinting the breakaway. Do I count it as an adaptability feature to the sprint judgment? I don't know. That's more classic style in my opinion. He is the best sprinter on Pedersen finishes, which is actually, I don't know anymore. As in, Limoges in the Tour de France was perfection for him. I actually thought Philipsen would have been able to beat him there, but he didn't. But then Arnaud Delis beats him on Bellegarde in Bessèges, and I'm like, that's a Pedersen finish too. So I'm like,
oh, that's a bit harder. That's steeper.
Yeah, but he was always king there in the past, eh? Can Delis beat him on Limoges?
Can Delis beat him on a hot January day up the Wollonga town drag that Coquard won? I'd like to see that. That'd be an interesting finish too. Or the Quebec finish.
Or that hilly finish in Polonia that we saw Carapaz win at some point and Ackermann a few years before.
I'd like to see it, but yeah, he had a great year. But in terms of bunch sprints, not cracking my top 3 for sure. Cavendish, the win at the Giro, 1 total win. The lead out obviously wasn't great. They have invested in that next year. Milan, breakout year. Beat Groenewegen in Saudi, coming out of his wheel, destroyed him. Jumps way too early. Positioning is a bit of a problem, but I'm keen to see him at Trek next year. I think he'll do the Giro and take some of the sprint weight off Pedersen's shoulders. And then others that I really want to highlight, obviously there's Gavira, who looked good at the start of the year, maybe got the extension, and then didn't see him for the rest of the year. Tyson, quick at times, decline. I actually think if Tudor get the wild card, will win a Giro stage. Look, we'll like
Dainese
that.
Style.
I think Decline's better than Dainese.
Okay.
I think Decline's actually pretty solid sprinter. Ackermann went to Israel. Don't know what they were thinking. Demar at Arkea just lacks the top end to me, but obviously very, very fit rider. But yeah, just lacks that top end. Milano's the one I want to highlight from your shortlist, Benji, of sort of the honourable mentions. How good would Milano be on 21 Quickstep or 2024 Bora?
Or 2023 Alpecin in Groves' position? I don't know.
He's pretty good.
He's pretty good, and I feel like he's also pretty good at positioning himself sometimes. Now, the stage win he did have at the Vuelta was one with a perfect lead out. That's the Oliveira one where
that was good.
Oliveira shot him past people. For me, it's just very inconsistent, and I don't know what the reasoning is for that. As in Guangxi, he was consistent, but I feel like over the years, I've got a very inconsistent feeling about Milano, where over the Vueltas that he rode and so forth, he wasn't competitive against the tier 2, 3 competitors, but then suddenly out of nowhere, he can win a stage. And it always feels like that for me.
Even the Vuelta. Even the Vuelta itself. There's some random sprint stages where he's just nowhere. Like stage 19. He's coming 20th. Don't know if he had a mechanical or something with a Dainese one. or
Was
the
that a
stage in
crash
Madrid.
that day?
Yeah, maybe he crashed. And Groves' lead out crashed in front of him unhelpfully twice in the sprint stages in the Vuelta as well. But, you know, the big highlight is he won a UAE Tour stage and he was competitive sort of in the other two against Welsford, Kooij, Groenewegen, Merlier with, who was his lead out? If I'm looking at UAE. His lead out
UAE Tour? Or?
His lead out at UAE Tour was Langen and Bjerg. Like,
I don't think he had a problem. I think he was positioning himself.
Yeah. So as a one-man army, he's really, really good. So I just want to give a shout out to Milano. As you said, a bit inconsistent. But let's go through your top 5, Benji.
The 5th position was the hardest for me because on one end you've got the versatile Pedersen who can win Grand Tour stages on his specific terrain, can be relatively consistent throughout the actual sprints, but on pure flat sprints has a difficulty actually competing for the win at any point. So that's a difficult one. Then you've got the traditional ones, Jakobsen and Groenewegen, who didn't have the best season. Let's be honest about that. Had both one World Tour win, had some other wins next to that. And looking at those 3, I put Pedersen at the top personally because I like the versatility for where cycling is going, with versatility mattering more in sprints these days. So I've put him above Jakobsen and Groenewegen because their season just wasn't that great. Honorable mentions that did not make my top 5 are Cavendish winning that Giro stage, Welsford, De Lee, Bauhaus, Van Aert, stuff like that. Just most of the list we already mentioned is not making my top 5, obviously. And above Pedersen, I've got Groves in 4th, under Kooij. The reason I've got Groves under Kooij is that I mentioned it before. While Kooij has stat padded his victories, I do believe Kooij is significantly faster on the sprints and is also slightly versatile, while Kaden Groves is very versatile, but has mostly won races with limited competition, to the point that only the Giro victory was truly prestigious when it comes to competition. So the comparison there is that I value that from Kooij more than Groves, and therefore Kooij is on 3rd spot. So Pedersen 5th, Groves 4th, Kooij 3rd, Merlier I've got 2nd. You mentioned 2 reasons earlier, as in his schedule was not good to represent him as a top 3 sprinter, and he would have had better results if he was sent to a Grand Tour where he would undoubtedly have won a stage. He can compete for a victory at the Giro. He can compete for a victory at the Vuelta. And if he's in a good position also at the Tour de France. 2nd for me in that. And then Jasper Philipsen in 1st. Well, there's no...
Yeah.
No need to talk about that one. But like, are we judging Groenewegen and Jakobsen too much on the fact that they had to focus on the Tour de France and therefore did not get the Merlier-style race schedule?
I mean, Groenewegen did they did a million other race days too, you know?
Yeah.
Groenewegen did Tirreno, didn't win it. It did win at Saudi, but yeah, he did Dauphiné.
And Merlier UAE brings it up for me.
Yeah.
That was on point. That was on level.
And the Paris-Nice was a nice sprint win too. I've gone with 5th, Groenewegen. Okay. I think Groenewegen, I would take him over Pedersen as a bunch sprinter this year, all things considered. 4th, Groves, just because he's so versatile. 3rd, I have Kooij as well. Stop
copying me.
Yeah, because I don't think also, it's not like Kooij is getting gift wrapped a lot of these wins either. Like, he's putting himself in position, and I also don't know who his lead up would be if he does the Grand Tour next year. Merlier also have 2nd and Philipsen 1st. Because Merlier, I think if he goes to Vuelta, his season would look a lot different. It really would. Surely he would have won a stage. And
1 or 2 probably. But then again, last year we thought the same, right? And then Bennett schooled him with a Van Poppel lead out.
So let us know what your top 5 is. It's pretty hard. I'd like to see anybody that doesn't have Jasper Philipsen in 1st. Who do you think is number 1 next year, Benji? That's what I'd like to end on.
It's always hard because when you're in this season, it feels like Jasper Philipsen will just continue his season into next year and just dominate next year again. I think Philipsen will be the number 1 sprinter next year because Van der Poel will probably be used in the same way for Philipsen as well.
But does the Olympics, Van der Poel might do the Giro, then prepare for the Olympics.
Or he might do the Tour de France and use the, what is that term they use for the
training, like what he did this year.
Yeah, but also there's a term for that, no? When you like overcompensation or something towards Olympics
Overload.
that come just after?
Overload, overtrain, overstimulate.
Because like I mentioned it in like a podcast recently where if you look at the World Championships this year was also Tour de France people that were in there. So
yeah.
Then again, if he focuses on mountain bike, that completely changes this entire story. And then
but he'll do road race and mountain bike. And if he does the Giro, then, Jonas Strigo will be last man. Maybe it's more difficult for him next year. But yeah, it's hard to look past Philipsen. He even finished the year dominating at Turkey, winning like 4 stages of Tour of Turkey. This year against Cavendish. It was against Cavendish. And
his ball. Well, Cavendish didn't sprint, right?
That was strange, yeah.
He was doing lead out
because he's like an ambassador for the race as well. But
who will move up though? Because like I already mentioned it. I think Welsford is going to move up from like, I had him like towards the end of my top 10 right here. But I expect him with, if I'm Poppel lead out, if it's on point, to jump into the top 5 and even compete with the top 3 next year.
I think Groves will move down.
Okay. I think too, because it will be difficult to go to the Vuelta with the same level of competition.
Yeah. And the Giro. The Giro has to have a better start list.
Yeah.
Possibly Milan moves up. I don't see him in your top 12. I have him above Phil Bauhaus. I forgot to
put him in there.
Yeah, a violation. I think Milan will move up a lot, but it depends on the lead out as well. It's going to be interesting to see how the lead outs are split between him and Pedersen, just like with Ewan and Groenewegen, just like with Merlier and whoever. Quickstep have as a sprinter now. Jakobsen's gone. So you think Welsford's moving up into maybe the top 5?
Yeah, I think Welsford's moving up to the top 5. I think Kooij might be competing for the top 2 next year, depending on the lead out that he has. If he goes to the Giro and so forth, it all depends on that.
Yeah,
because if he arrives with a shit lead out, he might just be on the same level as this year in that sense. So those 2 I'm looking at.
I think Ewan moves up a lot.
Yeah, he's not even in my top 12. So
yeah, I think Ewan. It's the only way is up. The only way is up. So
can't go much more down.
I think Ewan moves up. But yeah, let us know what you think. I think it was a pretty strange year for sprinters. Maybe definitely. I think it wasn't the best year for like sprinting.
Is it possible that Merlier contests Philipsen?
I think he's the one. Yeah, but who's his last man? Merku's off to UNOX. No, Merku's gone to Astana with Cav.
Casper Pedersen, I don't know.
Casper Pedersen, no good. I had a look at his, for unrelated reasons, I had a look at every lead out he did this year, earlier in the month, and I don't know, I'm not sure he's the solution. Maybe he improves. It was his first, he's transitioning from track cycling, but yeah, it all, I think Groenewegen moves up too, and does Cav get his stage win in TDF, Benji? Because he's extended.
The last time you asked that to me, I told you that he was going to win on the Champs-Élysées, so not exactly making a good mark for myself there.
Well, Merku, Casebowl, Cantor.
For the sakes of banter, yes, he's going to win. He's going to win a stage at the Tour de France. And I will go as far as saying that Jakobsen's the one that will move down, in my opinion, because at Quickstep, he at least sometimes got into a good position. At DSM, I just don't trust them to get him into a good position at all.
Yeah, me either, because, like, do you put Tobias Lund as that lead-out role? I think you might. They got Meyerhofer. Can he do that? So they do have the young riders, but yeah, they're going to have to work that out. Degenkolb, frankly, can't do it. I watched enough of that this year, and I wasn't particularly impressed with his lead-outs. But yeah, let us know. I already said that before. What's next, Benji? We done lead-outs and sprinters.
I think they got Bram Welton for Groupama as well at DSM, which...
FDJ got Mark Sorrow, baby. Just announced. Someone told me there's no... Mark's... people stealing a living.
Rude.
What's he... I guess is he...
Wasn't he the man that cleaned up the Poitou Charentes 2 years ago?
Yeah, he is the ultimate farmer, man. Like...
In a good way, right? No. Last year, he won 3 stages in a row of Poitou Charentes.
Yeah. They're trying to Is there a big battle in Potter?
Wait. How about this? We've got a head-to-head. Will Sam Bennett at Age Desert or Marc Sarrault at Groupama? Who's going to have the better season next season?
There was a battle. The Battle of Poitiers was in 1356.
Jesus
I remember
Christ.
that. Who? Sarrault versus Bennett?
Yeah. Bennett at Age
No,
Desert?
I mean Demar versus Bennett. Come on, Sarrault. Let's be serious.
Demar will have a better season than
Let's be
Bennett.
serious for a second. Yeah, you think Demar will have a better season?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, AG2 are not exactly renowned for their
sprinting abilities.
who's their Bramati? Not sure, but yeah, I think FDJ are trying to replace Demar with a number of riders like Penway and Pithy and Sarrault, and they're probably all three of them cheaper than Demar's salary combined, I would say. So
hopefully,
I would hope so. But yeah, the cash is short, and they need sprinters for the French circuit. There's just so many races like Paris-Chauny and whatever, all these races. And he only had 27 race days this year, so maybe he was sick or had a crash, don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening as always. We'll be back with maybe our Classics Awards, Classics Riders Awards next, I would dare say. As well as then we've got the GC Awards, All-Round Rider Awards. They might not all be as long as this. We might try and tighten it up. Reminder, we are going to Ruler live on Friday the 3rd of November. If you haven't got your tickets to see us at 7 p.m, then as well, where we'll be talking about transfers, non-mergers, mergers, and more stuff, some of which we haven't covered because there's a lot of transfer news still going. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you with the next award show soon.